Okay, let us ChatGPT. I'm going to focus mostly on how to use it, why those kinds of things are interesting, how to get productivity boost out of it, so on and so forth. So ChatGPT is a LLM, or a large language model. The way that it works is essentially it's taking the text that you type into it and it's giving you a probabilistic output of something you're likely to want to see as the output of what you typed in. What that means is it's really good at giving you text that looks like an answer to your question. It's usually good at giving you the right answer, but it's very good at giving you an answer, and it will look right.
With confidence.
With confidence. Yes, I have yet to see any lack of confidence from ChatGPT so far. In Google, you're searching for something and then you're looking for someone else's answer. ChatGPT has sucked in most of the internet and now is producing from that data results. It's cut off with September 2021, and so we'll get into some of the details of how that affected. But if you're using the raw GPT, it has to be something that it had access to. What's that?
That's ChatGPT
3.5 or 4, but without any plugins. So if you're using that, it's limited to data as of September 2021. But for example, Jay got these M5 stick modules, which are really cool ESP32 modules. They don't have a lot of great documentation, and some of the documentation is wrong, and so on and so forth. I asked it, can you give me an example of how I might do this on the M5 stick? And it was able to pull in the small amount of data from the M5 website and from Git or wherever else people documented their things or put example code, along with information it knows about how Python works, along with information it knows about how ESP32 works, and it was able to give me a pretty reasonable example of here's what the API may look like, or here's what you might want to try for this code. It was a way faster starting point than me Googling for 6 hours trying to find those things in the innards of the internet. And so there are a lot of things like that that ChatGPT will be really good at. It's kind of like asking Commander Data for information, because if you're a Star Trek fan at all, they would be able to find out how long does it get to this planet if they ask the computer and they do calculate, or you could just turn to Commander Data and go, how long will that be? And he has the context of what you're talking about. He knows what planet you're going to already. He can do the math, so he just spits the answer out. Well, that was a lot easier than going to do the work for it. Let's keep that guy around. ChatGPT is a lot like that. Okay, a couple of things, and then I'm going to share the screen and kind of go through this with you, actually. The paid version gets you access to a few things. So the free version is 3.5. It's GPT version 3.5, and it's rate limited. And if they get too busy, they knock off the free users first. GPT-4, the paid version, I've never been knocked off since I've been using the paid version. You get access to 3.5 unlimited. You get access, allegedly, to GPT-4 with rate limiting. I've never hit whatever limit they say you have. I use it a lot, and I've never hit it. So they seem to not enforce that as long as they're not having issues, I would guess. So I've seen people upload over 100 megabytes to it in the code interpreter stuff and not have an issue with it. Like I said, my text-based prompts and using some of the other abilities, I have not been able to use it enough to get it to tell me it was going to rate limit me. And the other thing that's relatively new is now they have plugins. Plugins are in beta, but you can access plugins if you pay for it. And as of last week, you can now access Code Interpreter, which is one I've really been waiting for. So if you have the paid version, you can access Code Interpreter. But a couple things that I wanted to show you is if you have the paid version, you get this choice at the top where you can choose between GPT 3.5 and GPT 4. They do spit data out faster on GPT 3.5. They kind of do the thing with 4 where it looks like an old typewriter and it kind of takes time as it comes down the screen, which I think is kind of their like UI attempt to rate limit you. And so that's a thing if you want to use it. I almost always just use 4. I have used 3.5. It is not quite as good as 4. 4 gives better answers to a lot of things. If you go on the left-hand side, all the way down to your user, and you click the ellipses to the right here, you get your settings. So if you go into settings, you get general beta features and data controls. Come down to beta features and turn on plugins and turn on code interpreter. So those are super useful. Again, you're coming to your user on the left side, the ellipses, settings, and then under beta features, you can turn both of these on. So each chat that you add has context within itself. So you ask ChatGPT something a few weeks ago and then say, remember that thing we were talking about? It's going to tell you no. But on the left-hand side, you can see my previous chats. And so you can go here and say, click on a previous chat. Now it will have context on that thing. So you can continue your conversation. You can continue querying about it. I will regularly tell ChatGPT things like, continue, or keep giving me that data, or
try again.
Do that again, but this time louder. And so we'll get into some kind of example prompts and some things that you can do with it, but it will maintain context within these. And I'm going to jump into a couple of these to actually give some examples here. But first I want to show how you can use plugins and how you can use the code interpreter stuff. So if you start by selecting GPT-4, and if you've selected those, you'll already have code interpreter or plugins here as a drop-down option when you click on or mouse over GPT-4.
Do you need settings to do that?
Yeah, you need to turn on those settings. So settings, beta features, you need to turn both of those on. Once you do that, like I said, you can go to code interpreter and plugins. ChatGPT does not have access to the internet, but there are a couple of plugins that do. And so if you come down here to plugins, you'll see plugins that I have enabled now. And within any chat, you can enable 3 plugins. So you have to pick you can sign up for 1,000 plugins if you want, but you can only enable 3 within a given chat. You can go to the plugin store and add more. I'm going to jump here just to look at, so like link reader, if I add link reader on this chat, so remember on the left I have these chats, within the context of that chat, it could then access the internet.
Will the previous chats remember the plugins?
They will.
Okay.
And forever. So if you start one as code interpreter, and then you wanted to go look up something on the internet, no go. You can't use code interpreter with plugins. It's one or the other. Plugins, you can use 3 plugins. Code interpreter is its own choice at the same level of plugins. Does that make sense? There's some plugins that I really like that I think are really useful. But let me give you some more meat first on why this is so useful. So for me, I've had ChatGPT save hours and hours on a single task. It's able to take things and really do some really useful things. But if we ask it something like what's that upside down A I see in math a lot? It's pretty good at figuring out what you see immediately. It knew exactly what I was talking about, and it's able to then describe it and give what's a pretty good example and kind of high-level description of what that thing is. So, what's the funny-looking bee I see in music all the time? Or why are there hashtags in Mozart? It's pretty good at figuring out what it is that you're actually talking about. And so weird questions is one of the things I really like that you can sort of, like Google is ridiculously good when you go, what's that song that goes ba bum ba ba bum ba bum 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 ba bum, and it immediately brings up the YouTube video of something that doesn't sound like that at all, but is exactly the song you were thinking of. ChatGPT has that same kind of ability in a different sense, if that makes sense. It's also, remember that it's very good at language. So if you give it some context and you give it a little bit of context about something and you ask it like, let me bring it back to productivity, because you can have fun with it, asking it to give you a haiku about writing software on the moon or whatever, right? It'll do all those kinds of things. And if you don't like it, you click regenerate response, or you ask it to regenerate the response. And the great thing about that is, if we were writing a sitcom and we had 10 people in a room and we're like, okay, and then he walks in the room, what's he say in this case? And people, that's kind of funny. Oh, what if, and you riff off each other. You could do that for hours. ChatGPT just click regenerate, not funny, regenerate, that's hilarious, there's the one. Humans, it's really hard to keep up with how fast it can generate stuff. Yeah. Okay, so here's how I got the title for this today. I said, so now notice I'm giving context. I'm giving a tech talk on how to use ChatGPT for being more productive in your daily job. It's for engineers, very much not exclusively. So I go on and I give some details about what it is that I mean for this talk to be. And then I say, please write several possible titles. Several to it was 20, it turns out. And then I said, here are my favorites. So I wanted it to narrow down what I didn't, in fact, I don't know what I like about those. And here's the great part, I don't care. I was just like, you figure out what I liked about these. Maybe it's the way they're worded, maybe it's that they're a little cheeky, maybe it's that they summarized it perfectly, maybe I just like titles that start with the letter Q. But like, it can infer that now. And I said, and look, I ask it, can you workshop those? Like, that's how I might ask another human. It has enough context on English and how we use English to be able to understand you don't have to get things perfect. You don't have to spell words right. I corrected myself when I was typing upside down, whether it had a space or not. It doesn't care. It's just like you had said it to another human. It's going to figure that out. So it now comes from these ones that I liked, another set, and then notice without asking, it says, alternatively, if you want something a bit more exciting or playful, and it gives me another set based on this one that I liked. And so, One Giant Leap for Productivity, Harnessing the Power of ChatGPT was the title that I finally put in the Tech Talk channel for this talk. And then notice, now, I was sitting watching TV or something and somebody was talking a lot about sedition. And I was like, do I really know what sedition is? And so I asked it, and here you go, not just a definition, but like how it's used in the US and where it is in law and whatever. Notice that didn't have anything else to do with the context I was in. I didn't need it to have a particular context for that question, so I just asked it whatever chat I was sitting in at the time. So it's fine to just have one big open chat where you're just typing stuff into. The only thing is, if you go back later I'm like, oh, I really need that one particular answer on what sedition is, I'm never going to remember that it was in the chat about my tech talks. Another cool thing that it does that's one of those like engineering things, like, yeah, that's how you should do it. It uses itself to figure out what the title of your chat should be. So I edited this so that I would see it when we were talking, but the title that it put in here was ChatGPT boosts productivity. And that was the title of this particular chat. So it uses itself to name your chats. And so those kinds of things, it's really good at. Another thing was, I found myself explaining why flats are important in music and we shouldn't just do everything in sharps. Sorry if you're not a music person, but it's interesting if you are. Just trust me. And so I thought, I wonder if the reasons I think you should use flats in music are there any other reasons I don't know about? And so in one of my chats with ChatGPT, I said, describe why music uses sharps and flats and not only sharps. And so it gives me a list, and it turns out it was pretty close to the list I had of why you should use flats and sharps. And I honestly thought it might have a couple of reasons that were way better than my reasons. Unfortunately, it didn't. And so I'm like, well, shoot, that doesn't help my argument so much. And then I went on to, kind of ask some more questions about it and said, so in this, then I added context, like, okay, you said a lot about sheet music and why flats are important for that, which makes sense. So what if you're not using sheet music? Now is it important? And so it gives context on this. Now, what's useful here is I know the material. Like, I understand this stuff about music. So as it's giving me answers, if it's hallucinating, I know about it. If it's like, oh, well, flats are the same as sharps, I'm like, no, that's not true. Again, it's pretty good at getting the answers right, but you don't want to take this and then just do something with it. A great example of how you don't want to just take this and then use it somewhere is this is actually really great for paralegal work. Tell it, here's the details of my case. Give me all case law that might pertain to this. It's like I said, it's really great at being a paralegal because it is able to dig those things up. But the problem is people think of it like other computer things, where if the computer tells you 6 plus 7 is 13, then it is, and I must have been wrong if I thought it was something else. In this case, there is an actual court case where somebody's about to be debarred, or they may have been debarred, because remember, it's really good at generating English text. It's really good at looking like the right answer. And so if you ask it something that it doesn't know, or something that it doesn't have a good context on, going to give you an answer. But in this case, the attorney just took what ChatGPT gave, spit out, and then submitted it to the court as, here are previous cases that happened that prove my case. They were made up. So this attorney submitted to a court, here are cases that support my argument that previous case law already, and they were not. And so that attorney is likely to get debarred for having submitted false, I guess it's not evidence, but however that works out. False claim
Yep.
in court. So you do need to be very careful, knowing that it will look like a right answer, but it won't always be a right answer. And I'm pretty sure I can ask it to do this live and we'll get the wrong answer. So the mathematical constant E is kind of like pi. It repeats forever without repeating.
It's irrational.
Consonants.
It never repeats.
It never repeats, but it goes on forever, like that one weird song. And so if I ask ChatGPT, what is the first 10-digit prime in E? So it goes on and on forever with this string of numbers. And so let's say I want whatever string of numbers, the first set of any 10 digits in E that is prime. So how would you do that? So all the engineers are now working this out in their head. And they're like, oh, okay. So here's E. And this is the other great thing about ChatGPT is it can explain its work. And so you can ask it, like, how'd you come up with that? In this case, I just asked it for the answer, and it starts by describing how you would do it. So it's explaining what E is. That's great. Gives us the first few numbers of E. Awesome. Explains what it means that I want a 10-digit prime in E. Perfect. And then it goes on to say, we slide to the next digit and consider, which is also not a prime number, doing so, the first 10-digit prime in the decimal expression is 7427. Now look at that. That's, I don't know, maybe weeks or years of computation that it just did in seconds. Suspicious. Let's ask it. Oh,
Okay.
This isn't Linux.
Yeah.
I can't middle click. Oh, look at that. But the interesting thing is the previous times I asked it, it never picked a prime number. I think one of the times the number was even. Like, it was not a prime number.
Wait a minute.
So this time it might have actually gotten it prime. It makes me wonder if they are doing anything with the filtering that's gotten better since the last time that I asked it, to start to pick some of those things out. Or when you realize what it is that it's doing, it's a large language model. It is not, in fact, commander data. The answers won't always be right. So let me slow this down and just show everybody what I did here. Is in the chat. So I go to GPT-4, and then remember you can choose code interpreter, which we'll look at in a second, or plugins.
Yeah.
Now you click here, and the first thing you have to do before you have any is you have to go to the plugin store. Right now, they're all free, so it's a very open store. The only thing that I did notice today when I tried to grab one is when I tried to install it, it took me to a landing page for me to sign in to that company's website. That's the first time I've seen that happen. So now they're starting to have, which makes sense. Like if I have, I don't know, let's say I track my my financial data on Mint or something, and I want to analyze it in ChatGPT, I could choose to link my Mint account with ChatGPT. I'm not recommending that if it were possible, but that's there might be data that you have at other sites that you might want to link in. And so, anyway, you can come here, you can choose popular is a good place to get started with, and there's a bunch of things that are here. Kayak for travel is a super useful one I'll demonstrate in a second. Obviously, we just pulled up Wolfram. Wolfram is a great addition to this in that it can get math right. ChatGPT is much better at the English. Wolfram's good at the math, and so you can pull things that way. The other thing is you think about the large language model, like that I really find it convenient for is I can explain things. And so I can be as verbose as I want to explain the thing, and then have it spit something out from that. But you can give a context on like, I would like it to be like this, and please sneak in 6 jokes about amphibians, whatever, right? Like, and then it'll be there. And this is kind of the crux of what, I wanted to lay like how you can use it in general, but kind of the crux of the like next level ChatGPT things are how you can get it to integrate things with itself. So this idea that it knows PDF format and how PDF works pretty well, because that was all established well before 2021. But then you can use a link reader to get it to go out to the web to get latest data. So if you go, I want to do this XYZ thing with thing that used to exist with the latest Google Calendar API, it will go grab the latest Google Calendar API through a single web link. It will have the understanding, it understands how APIs work, what an API is, this kind of thing. So if you now give it, this is the current API, tell me how to do these things with that. It could be pretty good at that.
With a new API.
But my guess is that it doesn't know just by training about PDFs that it has dedicated modules to crack PDFs, which then give it the information it needs, and so it may not see into the guts of it. I'd be very interested in seeing what the plugin API for ChatGPT looks like, because how plugins interact with it should be a really fascinating way of seeing it from the underside.
Okay, so one of the ones I want to talk about is I asked it to book a flight for me, and so
The flight that will get there.
So I'm going to this summit in September, and so but I didn't tell it that. I wanted it to do it. So I said arrange possible itinerary, blah blah blah. So notice up here I have a link reader plugin enabled and I have Kayak enabled. So this first prompt I was pretty pleased actually with what it came back with. So I said, I'm leaving from Boston. I prefer Delta. My second preference is American Airlines. So I'm giving context again, right? And it says, yeah, I can help with that. I'll need some more information, which is great. Like the fact that it can come back and go, here's what I need from you in order to answer your question. I was like, great. And then I was like, but you're an idiot. You have this data, go do the work yourself. And it was like, oh, okay, great, good idea. So it went and dug up the data. And this is one of the things you can do in chat, is you can have ChatGPT, if you ask it to do something and it's not good at it, or it can't do it, which sometimes it'll just go, yeah, I probably can't give you a good answer on that. Not a lot though, it's pretty arrogant. But you can start to ask it bits of the total thing you need to build, and as it gives you answers, that's now in the context. So I said, please look up the details for All In Summit. So it figures out when it was, where it is, it got all that figured out, and then it says, now let's proceed with your travel itinerary. It asked about hotel, asked about rental car, and so I said I don't need a car if the hotel and Summit are in sufficient proximity. Now, I'm begging for it to hallucinate in this case, right? So I'm aware that it might not get that right. And so then you'll see it actually hit kayak 3 different times. It might have needed more searches for the dates and this kind of thing. It might have done one for hotels, one for, right? It's this kind of thing. And then it came back, and the first one, so it's clear that it doesn't hold context because it doesn't know crap about me when it recommended a 6 a.m. flight. And so it came back with these, and it gives you links to kayak. Now somebody told me Bard is now doing links and will actually do embedded images in its responses. And so Bard seems like it's actually better than ChatGPT with some of that data that it's getting, which, surprise, surprise, the Google large language model is better at searching the internet. Makes sense. And so I just continue, you can see it goes back and forth, and I just keep iterating and going, yeah, but don't you have a flight that does this? Don't you have a flight with that? And meanwhile, no one's getting annoyed with me. I mean, that's one of the great things, is not only is it giving me quick answers and like resolving my thing, but like if I had an actual travel agent.
Everyone else would have slammed the door.
Right? Like,
Enough.
yeah, humans would be really annoyed with my, but I can be
So is ChatGPT, it's just hiding it.
You see, Eric?
One other thing that I really like that I haven't used much, but that somebody else mentioned, that when they're learning a topic, one of the great things is when people are debating it. And so in this flats versus sharp thing, I finally said, make arguments, and then I said, create an argument between 2 characters who insist that sharps, one that insists that sharps isn't, you know, right, and one that wants sharps and flats. And so then it gives me an argument between these 2 people who are like, well, that's a pretty good point. They're very nice people.
That's not an argument.
And so, actually, which is a great point. One of the other things you can do is you can tell it to give me this. Now, for fun, you can say, give me this in Shakespearean style.
No, as a Monty Python skit. Yeah, okay.
Or as a Monty Python skit, absolutely. But another thing that can be really useful, like as we're using it to create blog articles, is give me this in a slightly cheeky manner. Or give me this in a professional but humorous tones. So it really does do a pretty good job of understanding the context or the tone or those kinds of things. Okay, I didn't really get into the code interpreter, which is really interesting. Code interpreter, one thing that is useful to just go into code interpreter and do, it should be able to just give us this. So these are what you can, what code interpreter can interpret. So when I think code interpreter, I think Python, but it's spitting out image files, PDF, HTML, XML file, and Python scripts. So it does have Python script. So the other thing is it can actually create graphs and charts, but it doesn't output them in like PowerPoint format or in an image format. And now it does say image format, so I wonder if you could ask it to, all right, here it says libraries like Python Imaging Library or OpenCV can be used to process image files. So one thing it will do is I gave it my harvest data. So I download a CSV of my harvest data, my time tracking, because I want to find out like what am I spending time on that I shouldn't be spending time on and try to refine my schedule. And so I said, here's a CSV of the CEO of a software company that's this. So I try to give it context again, right, of what it is, because it will give me things like, for a company of this size, you spend way too much time cracking gumballs or whatever it is. So it will use that context. So always give as much context as you think might affect the answer, right?
Fair, yeah.
Some other things that you can use ChatGPT for that have saved me hours, or that'll allow you to punch above your aptitude, are that I've asked it, okay, I'm using Google Sheets and I'm trying to solve this problem with it. And I have this data coming in like this, and it says, you should use a Google Sheets script for that rather than trying to do it in like Excel kind of format. And I'm like, well, that sounds great. Can you write one? And it will spit out Google Sheets code, which I was not familiar with. So, well, okay, we can, as coders, we can pick up a new language pretty quickly. I don't know what it is. I'm gonna have to Google, what's the language? Oh, it's JavaScript, but they modified this, and you can only start variables with the letter T, or what the frig ever. And so instead, I say, generate the script that will solve this problem given this, this, and this. And it gives me a script, and I'm like, oh, my spreadsheet isn't formatted like this. It's formatted like this. And so it tweaks the variables and gives it back. Now, it might be a little bit buggy, actually. I'm hoping Code Interpreter is a lot better, because I was doing this pre-Code Interpreter. And it was pretty good pre-Code Interpreter. But now with Code Interpreter, that's one of the things that was way better from ChatGPT 3.5 to 4. But now Code Interpreter is a whole nother level on top of that. And then, like I said, if it's wrong, it's way easier to tweak that code. Be aware that it might be wrong. So if you're getting code out of it, it's not an instant, like just snap that in and paste that in somewhere. And also, if you're taking code from somewhere else you want to put in, make sure that's code that you're allowed to put into ChatGPT, please. Make sure that we have the rights to do it, or that it's not IP for us or one of our clients that we're putting in. So that is one of the things that you have to be careful with ChatGPT and OpenAI, is what information are we giving them? There's certainly, anytime you type a Google search, you're giving Google information also, right? So it's always just a balance of what things are we not, maybe from a client, just absolutely not allowed to give out, and what things give away secrets from us, and how useful is the week of productivity I just saved to give that thing away. Sometimes I'll make a judgment call on those things. So there's so many productivity things. Like I said, if it's a non-technical role, like for my non-technical role as CEO, I'm using ChatGPT to save me boatloads of time. It's crazy. It's really increasing my productivity. And for coding stuff, I've done a few coding things with it. It was like, gave me a jump start, right? I don't have it just doing the work or whatever, but it gave me a quick jump start, and I was able to be writing productive code way, way faster than otherwise. And I know some people have used it for stuff like where the code is okay to put in, and the job was a little mundane, from like convert Perl code to Python code. It can be really good at stuff like that. So one of the other plugins I like is Scholar AI, which has access to tons and tons of research papers. And you can ask it to explain things to you, or you can ask it, based on state-of-the-art research, what kinds of things might come next based on what the current newest ideas are. It's been really good for some research around those kinds of things. Chris said there's a tool called Find that's really good at taking the ChatGPT answer and like citing references to it. Yeah. And sometimes when you get really bad answers, sometimes Regenerate will get you a good answer. Sometimes you've stepped on a thing it's not good at. Well, hey, thanks everybody. If you have additional questions or others, like, feel free to just holler and let me know, or ask, or whatever. Happy to continue the discussion. But thanks everybody.
Thank you.